With Goku vs. Superman ending off the first season of Death Battle on a high, albeit kind of infamous note, Death Battle would spend the next 4 months preparing the next season. And as we previously talked about, Ben had to do a lot of the heavy work himself, but with this season, he was ready to go in with a new team, more assistants, and easier production. And given how people in the comments section of that video were anxiously awaiting this season in particular, let's just say for those people, I want to take you for a ride.
I want to take you for a ride. I want to take you for a ride. I want to take you for a ride. I want to take you for a ride. I want to take you for a ride.
Season 2 of Death Battle is what I like to consider to be the most polarizing season, and at first glance it's not too difficult to see why I think that. On the one hand, this season is home to some of the best and most beloved episodes of the entire show. But on the other hand, it's also home to some of the worst and most reviled episodes of the show. In fact, this season is also home to my all-time least favorite episode, barring the mistake. Though I'm pretty sure it is not the episode you think it is. But it could be contested that following seasons would have lower low points and high points that don't hit quite as high as season 2 did. And I would definitely agree with that. But the reason why I consider it more volatile has less to do with the quality of the episodes and more of the production behind them. I mean, it's not too difficult to see why with the wonky 32 episodes of season 2, which is double the amount of episodes you would see in seasons nowadays. But in terms of scheduling, this one was a nightmare. A lot of episodes would take about a month in between waiting periods, but other times it'd be 3 months, and other times it would only be a week. Not to mention that the release of episodes constantly had to get switched around, with some episodes getting delayed and other episodes getting rushed out the door. And when you remember that during this time, a lot of Death Battle next times would reveal only one of the combatants instead of both of them, yeah, the waiting periods can get a little too long. Honestly, I think that the inconsistent waiting periods of Season 2 are kinda justified, because this is probably the most experimental season of the show, using a bunch of side characters, having some less popular matchups on the show, and establishing the fact that previous combatants are able to come back. And there's no place where you can get a better feel for this experimentation than with the Season 2 premiere. He-Man vs. Lion-O establishes the theme and overall vibe of this episode almost immediately. That magic of the 80s vibe perfectly carries its way into both analysis portions, with Boomstick showing no confusion over any of He-Man's crazier feats up until the magic a chain back together bit, which I think would have been funnier if Boomstick fully committed to not giving any reactions at all, but it's still a good bit.
You know, I'm really getting tired of people ripping off Superman.
What do you mean by that? Most characters you've covered up to this point have nothing in common with Superman, so what the f*** are you talking about? Lion-O's analysis is about the same. It's fun. Boomstick saying kittens are adorable makes up for any problems that this analysis section has. No, I will not be elaborating. And this whole 80s vibe perfectly carries its way into the fight as well, with both voice actors putting in great work to give it the feel of a Saturday morning cartoon, with their campy dialects and puns, as well as just all sorts of other crazy moments, like He-Man's response to Cringer getting confusion to just uppercut him into the sky, and he doesn't come back down till the end of the fight, so he just entered terminal velocity so he can also beat Tifa! Wait, too soon. And there are other moments like He-Man twirling his arm to create a tornado, and then at the end where he just punches the Sword of Omens, and it shatters on contact. That's kinda great. And also the mountain scene. The sound design is alright, but man, look at this shot composition. And the way that Lion-O's sprite looks kinda worried as he's about to destroy it, it really does come off like he's using everything he's got. Although, yeah, this sword fighting animation does look kinda janky, but honestly, the raw moments of the fight make them easy to ignore. Yeah, there's so many great moments, but then the ending happens. It's kinda lame. Supposedly he, stomps on Lion-O, even though his feet aren't even connected to his body, but okay. And then he just no-sells the Eye of Thundera despite it being the strongest thing He-Man has ever fought, and how it's more than capable of obliterating him. Though I will admit I do like the outro clip, with Cringer feasting on Lion-O's corpse and He-Man referencing the funny "what's up" meme. You'll love to see it. But yeah, the conclusion sucks anal beads.
The Eye of Thundera is easily the most dangerous weapon He-Man has ever faced, more than capable of obliterating him if given the chance.
So, why did He-Man win? Have any other He-Man's feats, enemies, and abilities been able to match that? I don't know, that's just a bit perplexing. Oh yeah, and the Remember Kids section is very charming, and even though it ends up being a sex joke, it does admittedly come across as a good parody of those sections from back in the day. So I think it's fitting to give this episode a score of 84 out of 100. And Bison should have fought Rugal Bernstein. Yeah, this is yet another Mortal Kombat versus Street Fighter rivalry matchup that is no connections beyond just being the rivalry itself, and also final bosses of those series. Yay. To be fair, I did think the analysis portions were good. Shao Kahn's was interesting, his conquering achievements were... Okay, I was not expecting a vacuum. His conquering achievements were kind of out of order, but it's still nice to learn about them before MK11 just straight up ruined his character. But Bison's was more interesting to me. You have them covering the name changes, the explanation on how Bison was able to weaponize his soul, and the surprisingly intriguing motivations that he has. Though the Captain Planet bit went on for too long, I get that was a joke, but that only works if the joke is actually funny, and it's not funny, so meh. Good analysis portions. How does the fight stack up? Well, I mean, we're off to a great start with Shao Kahn's limited sprite animations, making some moments looking really janky, like this jump and most of Shao Kahn's charge attacks. Yeah, I'm just gonna let that vacuum keep doing his thing. I mean, we do get some cool looking combos here and there, as well as some other highlights in the episode, like this moment where Kahn was able to resist Bison's soul manipulation. And it does create a decent dynamic of Bison's mobility versus Shao Kahn's raw power. But the whole final Bison moment sucks anal beads. Yeah, Shao Kahn adapting to its attacks, it's cool, but you're telling me that Kahn was struggling against base form Bison, yet he's able to just no-sell final Bison's attacks and, like, two-shot him? Ah, well, at least it does lead up to a pretty good death. Better than his other episode, but let's not worry about that. Though Bison's hands stick out a little too much, but otherwise, it looks brutal enough. I do think the outro clip is kinda confusing. He's shooting a bunch of orbs, but only one of them is shown to hit Bison, let alone anything. So it's like, where did the other orbs go? I guess you could tell this is just an alright episode. 68 out of 100. I think that's a fair score. I like how these next times say that you can only see these episodes on Screw Attack, but when you click the links, it just redirects to the Rooster Teeth website. All I'm gonna say is that this is one of the most underrated episodes of the entire show, and it's not even close. We'll get to why the fight goes hard, but I actually did enjoy both of these analysis portions. Ryu's analysis highlighted the origin of his weapons, like his scythe being from the blood of humans, and I even found some of the jokes to be kind of amusing. I like the callback to Yoshi vs. Riptor, the magic hat bit was pretty decent. It was a way more fun analysis than I was expecting it to be. And as for Hiryu's analysis, first of all, Wiz keeps saying it wrong, and second of all, Strider 2014 game, woo! Play it! But since I recently finished playing that game, Hiryu's story interested me more than my first viewing since now I know the character pretty well. So it was cool to learn how he had to be pulled out of retirement, all of his other abilities, his relationships with comrades and family. It's good stuff. But the fight though? Absolutely based. Remember in season 1 where I talked about a key part of Jordan Lange's animation style was these fast-paced beatdowns? Unless if you don't remember that because for some reason you're not subscribed to this channel, are you? Well, I think this episode is the best utilization of it. The sense of speed is not only really good, but it also feels natural given the nature of these two ninjas. And it's even accentuated by the great music choices, particularly Ryu's determination from Warriors Orochi 3. Hiryu dodging the ninja star is slower than I would have liked, and a couple of moments are a little slow overall, but other than that, this is literally one of the best sprite animations of the entire show. I'm serious. I know what I said. I mean, you have the wall jump combo into the Azuna drop. That looks so good. And then you have them climbing up the wall, slashing at each other, with this shot of their shadows just zooming upwards. Holy shit, that is such a good shot. Woo! And Ryu giving it his all to destroy Hiryu's entire legion. It actually feels like he's putting in so much work, especially when you remember that Hiryu has mostly just been using his cipher against all of Ryu's other abilities. But then the final bit, the reference to the Ninja Gaiden opening with a great one-stroke duel. It gives a nice sense of anticipation as to who won. Unironically, one of, if not the best one-stroke duel of the entire show, with only one exception. But we'll get there when we cover that season. But instead of it being the kill, it's used as giving Hiryu an opening into the actual death, where he uses Ragnarok to just plow through every single floor of the building they're fighting in. And yeah, Ryu doesn't look that much damaged, but are you looking at this? He is not coming back from this. No! Certainly not when the outro clip has Hiryu summoning a bird bomb to destroy Ryu's corpse. And what follows is, Okay, not the best conclusion, I'll admit. You say that Hiryu can cut through people with his bare hands. Okay, and? To be fair, this is their way of saying that Hiryu is physically stronger than Ryu, but given that they don't give any actual strength feats, it's not worded very well and doesn't communicate that in the slightest. They did say that Hiryu was faster and that the Cypher countered all of Ryu's options. That's more than enough, but oh well. This is still one of my all-time favorite episodes of the season. Easy 93 out of 100. If the conclusion was better, I'd give it a higher score than Goku vs. Superman. Going into the first episode with noteworthy production issues, this was the final episode animated by Jordan Lange. He was going through some personal things at the time, which had to delay this episode, and overall he had to leave the team because they both mutually decided that it just wasn't working out. As far as I'm concerned, they're still on good terms with one another, but given that Jordan Lange was always going through a stressful schedule, in a season where everyone wished that they would be able to put out more episodes consistently, yeah, I can understand why they would have to hire someone else. And if this is the note he had to end off on, all I have to say is, okay. I just need to talk about the entire existence of this episode real quick. So, within these first two seasons, they often depict fan art of both of the combatants fighting one another. I'd assume that they credited the original artist of these works, because there are actually moments where they don't do that, and it is the big cringe. But as I was looking at the fan art depicting Ivy versus Orchid, I literally just paused the video, did the notorious YouTuber sigh, and said out loud to myself, were there really people asking for this matchup back in the day? I mean, you have the debut of an entirely new series, and you waste it on a matchup where the connections are just women with big tits. Even Rogue vs. Wonder Woman at least had the slightly more specific connection of super heroine, and also it had the Marvel vs. DC rivalry thing going on. But with this, the most specific you could get is femme fatale and fighting game rivalry. But the former doesn't work because there are lots of femme fatales in fiction, and these two don't have that much in common anyway. I mean, I guess if you want to say that they're proficient in magic, but those are different kind of magic, so it doesn't really count in my book. And the latter could work if it weren't for the fact that Soul Calibur was a 3D fighting game and Killer Instinct was a 2D fighting game, especially with one utilizing 3D models and the other one looking more like Mortal Kombat, so who the hell was asking for this matchup back in the day? This is legit one of, if not the worst matchup of fictional characters they've ever done on this show. Worse than Korra vs. Storm, worse than Batman vs. Black Panther, worse than Venom vs. Bane, worse than Android 18 vs. Captain Marvel, and worse than literally every fighting game matchup there is, including the ones where they aren't pitted against other fighting game characters. But anyways, that's my TED Talk. Let's go into the analysis. I mean, you know you're in for a great episode when Wiz is the first one to point out their bodies. And then Boomstick says that Deadly Ass is a better name than Snake Sword, despite the fact that no, it isn't. I mean, the very nature of this matchup has Horny Boomstick written all over it. If you look at the original thumbnail, you can actually find Horny Boomstick behind both combatants looking very, very sleazy.
And you just thought I was being a pig earlier.
I mean, you were being a pig though, but okay. Honestly, the only, and I do mean the only sort of enjoyment I can get from these analysis portions is when they got to talk about Ivy's backstory, as it is genuinely interesting. Other than that, this is the most irritating set of analysis portions, this side of Rogue vs. Wonder Woman, Starscream vs. Rainbow Dash. Even Mikey's analysis isn't that much worse. But surely the fight's at least better, right? Well, I mean, you can tell that the sprites clash pretty damn hard and the environment isn't used interestingly in the slightest, so that's a pretty good sign of what's to come. I'll admit though, these combos actually do look pretty cool. Ivy gets to use her snake sword in creative ways, aside from this weird choking animation, whatever that's supposed to be. And seeing her critical art does add something new to see on screen. And Orchid's tiger form being able to get around her sneak attacks is really good. And then there's also this scene. That's the one connection that they actually have with each other. And then Orchid throws her tonfas onto the ground and then just has them in her hands without picking them back up. Yeah, okay. And as for the death, it's a cool looking ultra combo and all, but it is kind of an abrupt ass pull, but it still looks kind of nice. Also frog squashing. Wait, did Orchid just flash her brother in the outro clip? Pretty cringe, not gonna lie, Wiz. I guess the conclusion's okay. Didn't really give them any stats, but at least they covered some advantages. But yeah, it's not too hard to see why a lot of people consider this to be the worst episode of season 2, or at least among the bottom 3. 27 out of 100. Decent fight, but annoyingly bad everything else. Ivy run back when? I remember really liking Fox vs. Bucky O'Hare. No joke, this used to be one of, if not my all-time favorite episode from season 2 for a long time. And Fox McCloud's analysis was a big reason why. It's one of my favorites of the entire season, if not the entire show. Even with the whole fade-out thing halting the pacing. And there's the whole amputated legs thing, which is wrong, but in their defense, it was an incredibly popular theory at the time, and it wasn't debunked until a couple of years after this episode. Which, side note, the way it was debunked...
They're just making that shit up. People have the weirdest imagination.
That kinda hurts, I'll admit. But yeah, Fox's analysis is really good. Also helps that Fox is one of my all-time favorite Nintendo characters, with Star Fox being one of my all-time favorite Nintendo series, and, although he's still not a combatant yet, Wolf O'Donnell being my favorite Nintendo character aside from Pit from Kid Icarus. So yeah, nice to see so much love go to the Star Fox franchise. That is very based, not gonna lie, Wiz. Bucky's analysis, it's alright. I mean, I remember back in the day they were just so passionate about Bucky O'Hare. Like, holy shit, look at this really obscure character from back in the day. He is so cool. I bet you don't know who he is, but he's awesome. You should totally watch his show. And then they proceed to not give you any reason as to why you should go checking out his show. They don't really say anything about his character other than he leads a team or he has guns. Cool theme song though. And there's also this line.
If Hitler was Skynet.
I refuse to let this line pay any rent in my head. But as for the fight, it actually has an interesting start. The hate for Slippy Toad back then was annoying, but I can understand why it's there, I guess. Although I'd argue Peppy is more useless to the team in terms of fighting experience than Slippy is, or at least that's been my experience, but shh. And also this smart bomb here, this is the icon used for collecting the smart bomb, not really shooting it, so that confused me back then. But nowadays I know what they were trying to do. And then they get to some planet named... Ha! And then they get on the ground, and this is where the fight really begins. The reflector comes out too slowly for some reason. This is the shine from Melee, and I find the lack of it coming out on frame 1 disturbing. And then you have this Firefox bit, which is painfully slow. I do like how Fox destroys Bucky's already destroyed ship with a single charge shot. But buddy, where are you aiming at? There are some other moments like Bucky grabbing Fox during his Fox illusion and then oh my gosh. I see you. All right. This is good. And then we get the death with Fox's legs being blasted off, but he just doesn't give a shit as he uses a jetpack to just charge right into Bucky, who makes this surprised expression. And then he drags him on the ground, chokes him completely, fires a charge shot, and then blows his head off. And combined with the choking sounds, man, this is brutal. And then you have Fox leaning back like he just went through a hard-fought battle. I love that. And I also like how the outro clip actually has Bucky's team reacting to his death. I also like how they prove that Fox wins via experience and ambition. That's actually very in character for Fox. But as for the overall episode, oh man, talk about an episode that completely fell off. But you know what? It's definitely not a bad episode. Just one that's a 59 out of 100. The Star Fox fan in me will always have a soft spot for this episode. With Terminator vs. Robocop being the first 3D episode of Season 2, who should step in but the ever so iconic Torian. And as far as I'm concerned, this is his first job as a 3D animator, period. Obviously, it's noteworthy when you consider the output of his other 3D animations, including some of the ones within this season, but back then I don't remember putting that much thought into the episode, which is strange when you consider that this is one of the most viewed episodes of the entire show. I just remember it being a decently loved episode that was also criticized for its jank animation. So this was yet another Season 2 episode where I was kind of curious as to see how I would think about it. And color me shocked to these analysis sections being special. No, not just good or well made or even just decent, actually special. It felt like it had a similar pacing to a classic action movie, helped by the fact that the clips they used are in fact from classic action movies. It's kind of weird for me to explain, but the way that they transition from actual analysis to clips from the movies, as well as the general tone and vibe of their voices, I don't know, it just feels like the pacing of these analyses feel way different than most other sets of analyses, though I mean that in the best way. Especially since it includes two of the best end clips of the entire show. Terminator's iconic "I'll be back" line, and Robocop saying that his name is Murphy. Nice. And it even has a couple of decent jokes here and there. Once again, we have the good kind of horny boomstick where it's getting horny over weapons, not women.
Oh man, just looking at it makes me feel wonderful pants feelings.
Okay, he doesn't always have the best wording. At least it's creative, if nothing else. I also like Wiz criticizing the design flaws of Terminators and Robocop. That just feels so whiz to me. But then onto the fight, and ugh, these headlights look so bad. But then you look at the beginning, and it's such a perfect setup. Terminator is robbing a gun store that he just teleports into, and this is what allows him to get his disguise and his weapons, and Robocop is reasonably hunting down a wanted criminal, and that's what causes them to fight in the first place. We haven't seen a setup this good since Goku vs. Superman. In fact, I think this setup's better, because while Goku vs. Superman also had a perfect setup, it's the exact kind of setup you'd expect to see from these two characters. Whereas here, they took plenty of creative liberties that actually paid off really well. And even before the fight announcement, we get to see how they utilize their radars, with Terminator's radar sensing his armor and vital weak points, and Robocop's radar analyzing his criminal record and his danger levels. And the Tails fanboy within me is a huge sucker for some good duality. Also, it looks like Chekhov is pointing out some hydrogen fuel cells. Then the fight starts. It's a little rough. MK11 didn't exist until about 6 years after this episode, so they obviously had no chance of getting any good models. But even the environment, the buildings just keep flickering! Ugh! It doesn't hurt my eyes or anything, thankfully, but man! When you consider that Goku vs. Superman didn't have this issue at all, this is an interesting drop. You still got some highlights here and there.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I love the delivery of that line. It's a reference you just need to include, but I like how it's implemented, with Terminator being portrayed as someone who's just trying to take down his target as quickly as possible. Then you have other moments like Robocop using the jetpack to chase down Terminator's running, with Terminator showing off his athleticism and Robocop needing to utilize the jetpack to keep up with his speed. Then it takes to the skies and, Spider-Nator, I don't think this can wait till later. And I may be just being a hater, but I don't like this Spider-Nator. Look out, this animation's really f***ing jankinator. Though there is this really cool moment where Robocop is clogging the minigun with his own shots, and then it gets back to the ground with Terminator's skeleton, and Robocop's radar analyzing the weapon he was using and then tanking those shots knowing that he would be able to survive all 9 shots from Terminator's gun. That is actually surprisingly raw in context. But then the ending. Wow. Terminator is trying his best to just claw his way forward, getting in one last attempt to kill Robocop, who notices his hydrogen fuel cells, and then sends him off with the jetpack as Terminator gives his final last words.
I'll be back.
And as for the conclusion, the outro clip is fine, but this conclusion has a surprisingly badass presentation. Saying that Terminator has been destroyed by all of the things that they describe Robocop surviving, that's good stuff, man. Overall, this was definitely a flawed episode, with many other tidbits such as Robocop's flickering mouth, the buildings being indecisive as to what lighting they want to have, and I fire green screen. Bye fire green screen. Hope we get to see you in another season someday. But the ambitious choreography, writing, and even the setup, as well as how their abilities are able to play off of each other, I can't help but admire this episode. 73 out of 100. This one might be contentious depending on how you view the jank, but personally, I love it. Okay, before we begin, I just want to say that there's this one clip from my Returner season where I point out that they have Tails at Multiversal. I just want to point out, I do not think Tails himself is multiversal, nor am I trying to imply that Tails beats Luigi, because if you focus on their game counterparts, it is nowhere near as debatable as Mario vs. Sonic. Tails wouldn't stand a chance if they used their game counterparts only. I was just saying that this was back when they used Archie and Game Sonic composites, and you had moments like this where Tails was described as saving the multiverse, and Luigi didn't have anything close to that. Yes, they did mention that Luigi was able to defeat Dementio, but they give no implication that it's anywhere comparable to Tails' saving the multiverse feat. And keep in mind, Death Battle has never even addressed any of the crazy higher tier, universal, even galaxy level feats that the Mario series has. And the one time where they did was in the black box in Wario vs. King Dedede, where they still contested that those feats were as powerful as people thought they were. So the best that they could scale Dementio is probably universal. Maybe. This is by Death Battle's logic. Not mine, not any other Versus debaters that aren't involved with Death Battle, not Sonic supporters, and certainly not Mario supporters, but by Death Battle's own logic. I think that including Archie Tails was wrong, since Archie Tails has only one multiversal feat, and it very obviously does not scale to his game counterpart. And I just want to make it clear that this is actually a really big problem with the episode. I already don't like how they called Tails a deformed flying stalker. But aside from that, as well as the whole multiversal shenanigan, I actually did enjoy these analysis portions. I thought that the Ouija reference was really funny, and I love how they try and contextualize the negative zone, even though what they say isn't actually true. But hey, they tried to contextualize other moments that just exist for no other purpose. And they also mentioned that Luigi has won Mario Party by doing absolutely nothing. More like this is absolutely based. And likewise, Tails' analysis is also really fun. You have them poking fun at his name being Miles Prower, and Wiz poking fun at his nickname and using it as a means of low-key throwing shade at Boomstick, who responds with,
Don't be f***ing ridiculous, wizard.
if he just said, don't be f***ing ridiculous, Wiz, it wouldn't be nearly as funny because he's making fun at the full version of his nickname. And of course, there's the bit where Wiz is surprised as to his tails being used to fly. That was a difficult sentence for me to say. But I will admit, Tails' end clip sucks. Goes on for too long, it's a bad line from Lost World, which already has bad writing. But right now, I am aware that this fight is disliked among a lot of people. But after rewatching this fight, let's see what I think about it. Though I will say Luigi nervously shouting "Let's go" while looking ready to break some bones is such a funny contrast that obviously wasn't intentional. But that's me laughing at the episode, not with it. First you have Luigi breaking through Tails' gun only to get bopped. He does get a hit on Tails with his hammer, but it doesn't impact him as much. This tornado bit looks pretty alright, and Luigi uppercutting the spin dash was well timed. A lot of people say that this attack does nothing, but first of all, Tails was still blown away by that, and second of all, you still see that he was taking damage. It's on screen for a bit, so it's blink and you'll miss it, but they do show his damage sprite right here. And even with the few frames that it's on screen, it's still being blocked by the smoke from Luigi's super punch. Although you do have Tails definitely flying longer than he's normally able to. And the whole invisibility flower scene is such a mess. I mean, they say that Luigi is invisible and intangible, but Tails is still somehow grabbing onto him and he's confused? What? This is such a messy scene. What the f***? Was that a Mario forward smash sound effect? Where did that come from? Then there is this Luigi bomb segment, which yeah, he's freaking out, but then he thinks about it and is like, oh yeah, time to break out the poltergeist. Though it is kind of lame how firing the bombs in the air doesn't even require Tails to fly upwards to avoid it. He could have at least moved his sprite up a little bit, make it look like he had to put some effort into dodging it. Though to be fair, it does lead into the genuinely cool moment of Luigi using the pipes to his advantage. And it perfectly ties into the time where they said that Luigi is able to use his clumsiness to his advantage. And then you have Luigi getting a pretty long combo, though for once long in the sense that it's a good combo rather than long that it goes on for too long because it's paced well, and it does do a lot of sufficient damage on Tails. And it appears again? Why? Up to this point, while Luigi was definitely getting hurt more, I don't quite agree with people saying that he was getting bodied. But the second half, I can definitely see what's going on. While he is smart enough to at least try to break the shield bot rather than try to break through the shield with his hammer, and Luigi is able to use his poltergust to counter Tails' gadgets, you have this whole flash grenade here, which is... yeah, that's not a good look on Luigi. And then you have him using the negative zone, and somehow Tails isn't really suffering any effects from the negative zone. The most he does is trip like once, but then he's able to somehow dodge all of Luigi's attacks. And then you have Luigi getting blown up by his own explosion, which is stupid given that he should have been able to outrun it. And the death is just one big ass pull. And the outro clip is very basic with Tails healing himself and Luigi just staying there, dead. And also the conclusion says that Luigi is weaker because he takes a little too long to uproot a large radish, in a game that takes place in a dream, when he should also be able to scale to Mario, who can crush enormous castles. Okay, that's bringing outside factors to the episode, and I don't think that's fair criticism on the episode itself. But yeah, I don't hate this episode as much as other people, but at no point in the history of ever did I say that I liked it, cause I don't. 41 out of 100. Luigi vs. Pac-Man win. Yes, I'm gonna be reviewing all of the bonus episodes on Ironically What of It. Vegeta vs. Mewtwo was a collab that Death Battle did with Silvermania. If I'm correct, there was just a bunch of weird meme videos where they just pit Mewtwo and Vegeta in a fight. But truth be told, Death Battle was the best one by far. Mewtwo may just be saying his name over and over again, but in actuality, he is saying, "It's mutant time!" And there's this extremely subtle characterization where it's heavily implied that Mewtwo is intelligent enough to not say those exact words out loud. because if he did, he would destroy the entire multiverse. But at the same time, he thinks that's boring. So he's more interested in confusing the viewer by acting like he's gonna be shooting a shadow ball, only to find out it's just a really big purple piss. And that is why this is the best death battle episode of all time. Okay, for this episode, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, because you have to keep in mind that this opinion is coming from someone who openly dislikes Pokemon and who grew up during this time period where no one would shut up about how supposedly good Generation 1 was, despite a bunch of other people pointing out how outdated it is. Although, to be fair, that came later, but given that I already wasn't a fan of the Pokemon series, I already found this whole praise obnoxious anyway. So, with all this in mind, the Pokemon Battle Royale is literally one of the best episodes of the entire season. Like, holy shit! Out of all the surprises in this season, this was easily the biggest one. This episode goes so goddamn hard, and I did not expect it to do that. But anyways, let's talk about these analysis sections. There's a sex joke that's actually funny. Boomstick being upset over Charizard's height is also funny. They talk about their abilities in interesting ways, as well as the effects that they do. They give numbers. These analyses just engaged me, bro. Like, wow. How do you get me to give a single about Pokemon? And we haven't even gotten to the fight. Like, holy goodness. Yo, let's just talk about this fight. Now, these sprites are directly taken from the Pokemon games, which have very still animations, yet they're still able to work around this extremely well. They directly say that two of the Pokemon aren't known to be very fast, yet the singular Pokemon that is supposed to be really fast has a convincing sense of speed with good animations. That is very, very impressive. And you also have other moments like Blastoise hiding in his shell to build defense and Charizard just lifting his shell and yeeting it at Venusaur. That is just that is both funny and amazing. Holy shit, dude. And then you have Venusaur's sleep powder working on Blastoise but not Charizard. That's a good showcase of type advantages right there. And then you have the beam struggle between Zard's Fire Breath and Venusaur's Solar Beam and how it just completely decimates the arena. Yet Charizard comes out on top and Venusaur's death... Ooh. Man, that actually made me feel kind of bad. Coupled with the roar? That's great. And then Blastoise waking up from a sneeze. If this ain't a light speed sneeze like with Asta, I don't want to hear it. But from this moment on, we've reached peak right here, dailies and mental gin. Peak! The rain dance and the fire ring set up the atmosphere incredibly well. Perfect atmosphere right here. And then Zard's individual bites have more impact than Fox and Bucky falling down to Earth. And Blastoise, despite being strong against fire types, he had to put in work to just pin Zard to shoot his water cannons into his mouth. And yeah, he did have to let go of one of his arms. So, immersion ruined. How dare you? You suck. It still leads up to a really, really brutal death. How do you make me love this episode so much? I'm losing my mind here. Yo! And the conclusion is really, really, really good. They cover how each move had so many specific properties and factors, as well as how Blastoise could compensate for his weakness to grass. And then you have this percentage bit, which actually kind of makes me remember that there was a voting poll before this episode. I couldn't find it, so you'll just have to take my word for it. And I'm not trying to imply that the winner was decided via votes, but something tells me that this was the voting poll for who they thought should win. But I don't know, it probably didn't work its way into the actual conclusion or the episode itself. I just felt the need to point that out. But yeah, wow, this is a really, really good episode. I originally gave this an 87 out of 100, but after thinking about it more, no. I'm literally typing in a completely new score right now. What's a good one? 90. 90 out of 100. And given how much I hate Pokemon, that is very impressive that you could make me love an episode this much. Fulgore vs. Sektor was the first episode that had Nervous Nick as a writer. Technically. This was more like a test run for him to see how well he would do. I am happy that this did lead him to go on to write more episodes up to this point, and even just keep working on Death Battle in general, up until recently that is. But hey, you gotta start somewhere, right? Though originally this episode was supposed to be Fulgore vs. Cyrax, but it randomly became Fulgore vs. Sektor. They even acknowledged this in the prelude, so I'm kinda curious as to what happened. What made them decide to go with Sektor instead of Cyrax? Hell, they even show a recolored Cyrax render in Sektor's analysis, so... well. We can worry about that another time.
I'm Wizard and he's Boomstick.
No! Why would you bring that back? The analysis portions did have pretty cool rundowns, and I like them explaining Fulgore's manufacturing and the Robocop callback. Wiz questioning why a ninja would use a rocket launcher and Boomstick doesn't clap back? Really? Boomstick singing the Mortal Kombat theme song will always be a cute running joke, and I love how it continues into the segue as well. But aside from that, these analysis portions were just eh. Fulgore's was pretty interesting, Sektor's had an interesting beginning, but the rest of it was kind of bland. Not a lot of good jokes, not a lot of interesting character moments or tidbits. This is one of those analysis portions that definitely feel more than a respect thread, but still feels like it's missing that gravitas that many other Season 2 analyses would have. Hell, even Season 3 had some cool analyses. But the fight, though... Okay, any people who have been a longtime fan in the actual death battle community rather than just an outsider like what I've been for most of my life, please explain to me, what the is a side dude? Because apparently this is one of his all-time favorite episodes. The one where they say has a 7-hit combo, but it was actually 6, including the missile. But since there's no implication that it even counted as a separate hit, it's only really a 5-hit combo. The one with a terrible-looking blurry shake effect. The one with the ultra combo that was only 29 hits and not 37. The one with this hideous-looking scene here. The one where barely anything interesting happens. The one where Fulgore doesn't use any of his no mercies outside of the outro clip. If this is really one of his all-time favorite episodes, then I'm convinced that this side dude person, whoever he is, doesn't actually exist and was never real. I'm sorry, but how else am I supposed to look at it? I mean, I guess it's not all bad. The devastation finisher was cool at least, and I like how Fulgore was able to use his chest piece thingy to break out of Sektor's fatality, even though they say that it deals 2 tons of pressure and Fulgore's weight is underneath 2 tons. But, not really a good episode at all. The most I can say about it is that I get ironic enjoyment out of it from the incorrect amount of hits in each of the combos. Otherwise, 29 out of 100. It feels very much like a Season 1 episode, but not for the right reasons. But given that this was Nick's test run episode, and he's absolutely improved over time, no hate for this. Especially since it was worth the next episode being a lot better. Despite Torian being super enthusiastic about working on this episode, its production didn't go particularly well. It just needed more time in the oven, so it had to be pushed behind Fulgore versus Sektor. But aside from that, production was apparently really fun for the team. Making this episode made Ben respect the Godzilla and Gamera series a lot more, even actively checking out some of their other movies that they didn't even analyze in this episode. Really shows how much love was put into these analyses. You have some good jokes like the gravity-defying drop kicks and the whole rant about Zilla, which was delivered as if Wiz is a longtime Godzilla fan who knows a lot of trivia. And they also include the bit where Godzilla lifts himself with his breath. And I like how they transition into calking it. That's some good stuff right there. As for Gamera's analysis, they start off with an okay Ninja Turtles joke, but later Boomstick smugly says,
He does machines.
You already made that joke in the actual Ninja Turtles episode, so at this point it just makes no sense. Sorry. Speaking as someone who has never seen a single Gamera film, his analysis was actually very interesting to me. I think that the only bit I actively dislike is the whole don't tell on Gamera joke, but to be fair, Wiz set him up for it and he did say, no Boomstick, it's not like that, and covered one of his more impactful moments from the movies. Then the fight comes out, and while the models do look a little too muted, I still like the way that they look, especially for Godzilla. Plus this one fully embraces the monster movie vibe and I couldn't be happier. Complete with an intentionally long intro that sets up the atmosphere. Godzilla's destroying the city and Gamera comes in an attempt to stop him, along with some CQC that is pretty jank, and I don't think it was intentionally jank, but a part of that is due to Gamera's turtle physique. And given that this was a Season 2 episode, there's not much they could have done to fix it in time. We do get some intentional jank with Godzilla's drop kick. And then when he lands on Gamera, it looks like he's using him as a skateboard. And then there's the scene where Gamera just carries him into space and tries to fucking slam down on the city. Albeit, he might actually destroy some children with it, but Godzilla using an electric pulse to get Gamera off of him after sending him to space, that was really cool. It's even cooler than this scene where Godzilla is using his atomic breath to slow down his fall, albeit it's not communicated very well, and honestly kind of looks like he's using his atomic breath to attack Gamera. I was able to pick up on this given that they said this is something Godzilla can do, but it wasn't used as well as the scene that was used to describe that ability. But then you have Gamera supposedly destroying Godzilla, who lets out a sigh after using up all his power, only for Godzilla to just menacingly rise out of the water completely unscathed. Gamera then tries to use his self-destruct, but Godzilla uses his atomic breath to launch Gamera in the air so that the self-destruct doesn't kill him, and the outro clip being Godzilla using the roar again as the water duplicates on top of him, I guess? This was one of 3 episodes from this season that I had to rewatch twice just to get a full idea as to what I wanted to say, and I'll be honest, this episode aged a lot better than I remember. 80 out of 100. It's really no surprise that this is the 5th most viewed Death Battle episode of all time. Still a good episode. Let's see what's next. So they're just bringing back cool characters now. Okay. It is worth noting that this is technically not the first returner episode, but that one was kind of a special case given that it was all 4 turtles have to fight each other to enter a round 2. Whereas this one, they just straight up brought back another combatant from another season, which I don't think anyone thought would be a possibility. And once again, we got Nervous Nick as the head writer of this episode. While Fulgore vs. Sektor was his training seminar, this was the first episode where he was officially labeled as the head writer. And with that in mind, Batman's analysis was more interesting than I thought it would be. They cover some new gadgets that he didn't use in his previous episode. They mention his fight with Bane as to how he let him up out of honesty, only to point out how Bane responded with him breaking Batman's back. And then they bring up the shark repellent misconception. It's a lot of fun. And likewise, Cap's analysis was also pretty fun. A couple of jokes fell off, but I still thought his rundown was decently enjoyable. The World War II moment though, the way that they set it up, having his original costume looking like it came from a circus, and then they say, oh, we got a cooler outfit, but it still looks like it came out of a circus. And then Wiz goes,
Some call it World War II.
and then the music is cut off completely with just silence. That was a pretty neat moment, I'll admit. And then they bring up the weird feat of Cap fighting off the personification of street drugs. Apparently this is something that Nick likes to bring up when flexing his knowledge, and that is both ironically and unironically funny in context and out of context. Then we get to the fight, and like with Luigi vs. Tails, this fight is also kind of infamous. I should point out that this is the first episode animated by Zach Watkins, who would become the first longtime sprite animator of the show since Jordan Lange. Yes, there were other sprite episodes before this, but they just kind of came in, did their one episode, and left because they couldn't really keep up with the schedule. Or at least I think that anyways. But either way, Zach was the first sprite animator to join the team and stick with it. At least for a time, but more on that later. And spoiler alert, I don't have a lot of nice things to say about this episode, but I will say that on a technical level, the animation quality is actually alright. There's not a whole lot of jank, and the animations are animations. But there are some highlights here and there. Cap's shield ricocheting off of the wall and leading into a combo, even if the grappling hook bit looks a little choppy in editing. Then you have Cap bashing his shield against the wall, looking damaged, but its damage just disappears the moment he takes it off the wall. Then he throws it into the smoke of Batman's smoke bombs with no line of sight. And then you have this scene. This is Death Battle's equivalent of the surprise Pikachu meme. And then you have this... writing the bat signal on Cap's shield. Cap does a facepalm. It's supposed to look like he was damaged by something or whatever, but it looks like he's going, why the f*** did any of that happen? I'm an idiot. This is... wow. This is definitely some ironic enjoyment here, I tell you what. But then all enjoyment goes out the window with a painfully slow death, where Batman very slowly walks over to pick up his shield as he kinda slowly launches Cap into the air and hangs him on a lamppost with his grappling hook. Yeah, at best this is just a weird death, and at worst, painfully slow and bad. And then the outro clip is Bats using the shield to slice Cap in half as if that's something he'd ever do. Even in the context of Death Battle, it feels out of character. And then they say that Cap is more durable, more powerful, and even faster, but doesn't have as much knowledge on martial arts and pressure points, even though Cap's analysis says literally the opposite. I mean, to be fair, they did say that Batman could dodge Darkseid's unavoidable Omega beams, whereas they said Cap could dodge gunfire. And then there's the whole sneaking around Superman bit, which is just, I mean, yeah, he could sneak around Superman, but in terms of a fight where he has no prep time against Cap, how's that gonna mean anything against an opponent that you say is a lot stronger and more durable? Yeah, this is not a great conclusion. Along with Luigi vs. Tails and Godzilla vs. Gamera, this is the only episode of Season 2 where I had to do a rewatch to make sure that my score was justified. And after said rewatch, I realized that yes, this is in fact a worse episode than Luigi vs. Tails. Because with that episode, no matter what you think about it, they had plenty of tools that could play off of one another, which allowed for some unique interactions. Not all of them were good, but at least they were there. That's not really present with this episode. There's only one interaction with the shield and grappling hook, and literally nothing else. And on top of that, for Batman technically being the first returning combatant, he barely does anything different from his previous episode. Sure, I still don't like Batman vs. Spider-Man as much as other people do, but at the very least, he used plenty of tools. He got to use batarangs, exploding batarangs, rope, bombs, grappling hook, tasers, smoke bombs, his stealth, and the armor from his cape, I think. Either way, in this episode, he only uses batarangs, smoke bombs, electric gauntlets, his grappling hook, pressure points, and stealth. And even then, it's debatable as to whether or not he actually uses stealth, because that's technically still a part of the smoke bombs. I'm thinking more of a 36 right about now. Yet another sprite fight that is entirely saved by ironic enjoyment. Steve Rogers versus Takeshi Hongo win. And yes, I have actually seen Kamen Rider, unlike the vast majority of the Versus community. The reason for the existence of this episode is actually pretty interesting. Not only is this the debut of Power Rangers, which he wanted to include all the way back in season 1, but Ben actively wanted to research a series that he wasn't familiar with, in that of Gundam. And thankfully Nick coming on to help write some episodes of the show gave him some extra time to do so. And this is reflected pretty well into the intro bit, where Wiz is more interested in the themes of this matchup, and Boomstick only cares about giant robots are f***ing awesome! And likewise, these analysis bits were pretty fun. At least White Rangers was. I like the whole speak bird bit, and overall they cover the campiness of Power Rangers pretty well. But then we get to Zex's analysis, and well, Boomstick gives us 3 sex jokes in a row, so how do you think it's going down? You also have Boomstick just casually insulting Zex as he's feeling grief for his failures, which is kind of a dick move, not gonna lie, Boomstick. And then when they talk about Noin, almost everything they say about her is just treating her as a sex object, which is one thing, but to have Boomstick say,
You'd think a cheerful girlfriend who doesn't have blood on her hands would help Zex lighten up a bit.
before transitioning to her soldiers getting killed, how do those two connect with each other exactly? I guess it could be their way of saying that Noin was supposed to help Zex lighten up, but she has her own problems to deal with, so she couldn't do so, but that's not at all the impression I got from the episode. Rather, it just comes across like they just went off on a random tangent. And of course, Boomstick says, "He won't be eating that!" And although Wiz tries to point out some cool stuff, like the whole Peacecraft twist, it's delivered as this big reveal, but they give it no build-up and it's shoved to the side as quickly as it's introduced, roughly around the beginning of when they start talking about Zex. I did not like Zex's analysis at all. This analysis is very comparable to Starscream's analysis. Sure, it doesn't annoy me as much, but it is just as disrespectful. But the fight, however, this is another fight I remember really liking. I remember it having some really fun dialogue, some good action, some standout moments that I still remembered even before rewatching this episode, and some great voice acting. And to be fair, I was mostly right with this rewatch. Kerbifer and Doug Drury do an excellent job in their roles, but Stuart Sklomak as Zex just might be my least favorite performance of the entire show. I'm serious. There's only one good line that he has, and it's the whole "I'll break your face" line, but then it's almost immediately followed up with a very wimpy "Kya!" And overall, he sounds like he has a bubble in his throat the entire time. Not helped by the beginning being completely out of character for Zex and especially for Noin. I thought we were done with this whole early 2010s humor nonsense. Get real! But that being said, there's still quite a bit to love about this episode. I like how they implemented the Epyon system to foreshadow the Megazord, even though it stops the fight, but apparently Gundam Wing is kind of like that, so makes sense, I guess. But along with that, it just completely nails the campy Power Rangers vibe to a T. Moments like them thinking they found the weakness of Epyon, only for it to just not work, and Saba saying,
"Well, this defies all logic."
That's a really fun bit that feels like something you could expect in a crossover between these two shows. Or at least something you'd you'd find in Power Rangers. And while I don't care for how Zex was portrayed in this episode overall, I did like how the Epyon system was being used in the fight. Although it's weird to see him just tank the attacks without trying to defend against them, it's at least contextualized decently well to where you can understand why that's happening at all. And the ending is great. The music and the kill really excel this moment, topped with a phenomenal death scream from Kirby, and then the outro has everyone crying. Zordon mourning the loss of his White Ranger, and Zex mourning the loss of Noin. Weird how Zordon's crying is the only one that's voiced though, but well. The conclusion is fine. They gave them the stats and factors that they needed to include. There's clearly a lot to love about it, but also a lot to hate about it. Definitely did not age as well as I remembered. 71 out of 100. If Zex's analysis wasn't as painful as it was to sit through, this would get at least an 86 from me. But I guess we can't have nice things, can we? Indeed we can't, because we have yet another Street Fighter vs. Mortal Kombat rivalry episode. Lame! Wait, hang on. They mentioned Ryu is afraid of spiders? Based! There are some other cool moments in Ryu's analysis as well. I like the text going over Ryu's eyebrows. I can confirm that hiding bushy eyebrows is definitely a blessing and a curse. And the whole joke with the "and diarrhea joke foot," with them actually using Google Translate to get that translation. That's the kind of flawed result you get from a website like that. Although they also use Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 to display the power of nothingness, even though it's not actually called that in the game, but semantics. There isn't nearly as much footage of that form as there was in Street Fighter V. Likewise, Scorpion's analysis was also really fun. His fire breath being referred to as a toasty is just pitch perfect. It's even more pitch perfect than Pitch Perfect 2 and 3 combined. Then you also have the Charlie Brown music being played during Scorpion falling down the stairs, and all the weird stuff like cooking with Scorpion. This is a good balance between all the quirky Mortal Kombat stuff as well as trying to make Scorpion look like a well-written character. Wish it happened more often, but we still can't have nice things even in modern death battles, so okay. But the fight, however, first of all, I just want to say I love how they utilize the Street Fighter 4 sound design. It makes every single hit, even the weaker ones, feel really impactful. And then this part of the fight has some other cool moments, like Ryu just casually reacting to Scorpion's sneak attack. If I had to point out any issue with this, is that Scorpion's fall looks a little too bouncy, and Ryu's voice clips keep swapping between his English and Japanese voice clips, but it's still fine. In fact, the use of voice clips throughout this entire episode creates the illusion that they're actually talking to one another. It's so well done. Obviously, I'm more familiar with voice clips for characters in most games, but when I first watched this episode, it made me think that there was voice acting. But then the fight starts to take to the Nether Realm, with some really nice looking pixel art, by the way. I mean, it's not as dynamic as the previous environment since it really is just on a 2D plane, so there's not a lot of room for dynamic shots, but hey, they still got a lot of cool moments. Evil Ryu's transformation is started by Scorpion overwhelming him with his teleport attacks, and then Evil Ryu just breaks him out of Scorpion's fire. That is such a good scene. Especially when he just dissipates his fireball with a single punch and completely shatters his sword by just blocking it with his arm. Both of those are incredibly raw and really sell the deadly levels of power that come from the Satsui no Hado. In fact, about this bit, before then, Ryu had to dodge Scorpion's sword in the first part of the fight, but then it started damaging him in the Nether Realm, and then it just breaks on contact after he goes Evil Ryu. That's actually a really nice touch. Not to mention that this is where you see the Shinshoryuken, and even though there are no visual effects, it's still really impactful with some great sound design. And then we get to the power of nothingness scene. I mean, his aura does look a little weird, with his eyes looking really big to a point where it looks like he's kind of going insane, but it more than makes up for it with Ryu's final speech, as well as the very impact of the Shinku Hadouken just blasting its way through Scorpion's body. And then it's depicted as if Ryu used all of his power.
I walk a path with no end.
Makes you wish this was the death, huh? But it's not. Scorpion does a really limp fatality, and Ryu just doesn't move. This doesn't actually bother me, because it's very obvious that Ryu used all of his power and has nothing left. But I will admit, this is still anticlimactic, since it's not that much different from the fire that he tried to hit Ryu with earlier on in the fight. Though I love how the outro clip is Scorpion turning into a penguin and pooping an egg onto Ryu's ashes. The conclusion sucks. While they do admit that the Raging Demon would be able to kill Scorpion, when you remember that they said Ryu was able to dodge point-blank gunfire, and then Scorpion got nothing for speed, barring just apparently awesome ninja attacks, whatever that's supposed to mean. And also the whole limitless power in the Nether Realm. Yeah, I don't think I need to explain why that's bad. But thankfully, the overall quality of the episode doesn't change at all. 86 out of 100. Looking forward to seeing Kirby versus Majin Buu in the next episode.
Oh, yeah!
Deadpool vs. Deathstroke had no announcement before its release, at least not on YouTube. But despite this, it is still the second most viewed death battle and is the only episode besides Goku vs. Superman to exceed 40 million views. So that clearly means that this episode is also something special, right? Let's find out. Deadpool's analysis is great, man. You have the tonal whiplash between Deadpool being everywhere at nerd conventions to going over his admittedly tragic backstory, but they still take him seriously. I like that.
And that's just if his extreme ADHD hasn't already put him into a bind.
Oh, I guess we're still using those words in 2014. Okay. And then you have Deathstroke's analysis, and yeah, it does point out the similarities to Captain America's story for a bit, as well as the Cap and Deathstroke staring contest. Boomstick making up Boomstickium in response to Prometheum, only to find out that Prometheum is an actual thing. But on the other hand, you do have moments like the my kind of woman joke and the got my junk stuck in the toast. Not funny, not funny, not funny. No. But I haven't even talked about the best part of both of these analyses, Deadpool himself. There are a good amount of people who really don't like how Deadpool is just randomly in every death battle season, but here they actually use Deadpool really well. He has banter that plays off of him, shoutouts to this line in particular.
Shut up, Wade.
Okay, Ben.
And Deadpool adding stuff to the script like raging sex machine and not garbage tier in MVC3, and drawing on Deathstroke's poster PNG, Boomstick trying to kill him at one point, and just frequently annoying our two hosts. And then the fight starts and you have Deadpool complaining about his bounty being $10 less than Deathstroke's, and even being the fight announcer. I'd like to say that for the most part this overall choreography is really good. There is a bit of jank here and there, but it's not bad at all. Plus, even though Deadpool is no slouch in combat, Deathstroke does use his superior skill and experience, like when he uses his staff to launch Deadpool into a speeding truck, or shooting the tires on the bus to throw him off course. It establishes a solid dynamic between the two. And Deadpool has some really funny lines, such as a TMNT tangent leading into his
I will not be labeled
line, and this bit here.
Pop, watching Deathstroke. God damn it.
Yeah, in case you couldn't tell, this entire episode is just comedy gold. Though about those sniper shots and even some of Takahata's voice clips, they are not audio balanced particularly well. Though it's almost saved by the funny delivery of dumb face. Almost saved. What really saves it is the dance battle. To think that Torian almost deleted this scene from the entire episode because they found out he animated this while drunk. Bro, please. I was drunk during almost half the entire recording process of the Kid Icarus Uprising soundtrack video I made about a year ago, and no one was able to notice. Especially since for some reason you haven't seen that video, have you? But then Deadpool does take this fight more seriously overall, while still maintaining his cocky attitude. Especially with the different way they handle their wounds. With Deadpool reattaching his limbs as opposed to Deathstroke removing the sword from his chest, and even then, Deadpool still got his limbs attached incorrectly. And then you have the more dramatic music in this fight scene, cut off by Deadpool saying,
All the children in the audience, cover your eyes.
and then it leads into a death which... it sucks, man. Deadpool's limp sword slash that apparently doesn't even decapitate him until they cut to the next scene, which by the way is the exact same sound effect as the death battle transition, for some fucking reason. Though to be fair, I do like the outro clip of Deadpool putting Slade's face on the front of his car. And the conclusion is fine. I like how the beginning line comes from Deadpool, though I'm not sure why he says the winner is Spider-Man! I don't get what that joke was supposed to be, but they did make their argument well enough. But yeah, this is easily Torian's magnum opus. It's not his best episode, not even the best in this season, but it is his magnum opus, given the insanely high view count this episode has, and I think it's well deserved. 96 out of 100. Higher than Goku vs.
The guy who fought Goku in one of the most biased fanboy videos ever.
Kirby vs. Majin Buu was the beginning of what Ben dubs the dark period of Death Battle. There were some other minor production issues beforehand, but these next 4 episodes had some of the worst. This episode in particular suffering from massive delays and constant changes, only to be rushed in the end. Originally this fight was going to be Kirby vs. Ditto, but then they noticed Kirby's pan-frying feat and they were like, yeah, Ditto's screwed. So it had to be changed back and forth and back and forth. In fact, this was almost an eating contest between Kirby, Goku, Snorlax, and Luffy. And I think they still want to do this. Please do it. But at the last possible minute, this episode was changed to Kirby vs. Majin Buu. And this episode still had a ton of delays. Never mind the fact that this episode was supposed to come out before Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. Kirby vs. Majin Buu was released only a week after Deadpool vs. Deathstroke. Funny how an episode with so many delays still had to be rushed at the end. But I still remember really liking this episode, so let's see how many of those production issues hampered this episode's quality. Kirby's analysis was pretty interesting. It starts off with a dramatic war story story and then abruptly cuts to Kirby before leading into how he's a mass murderer. Yep, that sounds like a Kirby analysis I'd expect. I did hear some people have an issue with this joke
Though he
here.
does have trouble wrapping his mouth around extremely large and heavy things.
Like my dick!
But this is actually insanely tame compared to the other sex jokes that they've used in so many other episodes before and after this one. This is the exact kind of joke you'd find among middle schoolers. It's just a really basic joke, and it's just like, really? Come on, man. At least the 1-800-PINK-RIDE joke is fairly amusing. I mean, it's a functional joke, and it's not entirely just a joke about sex, but rather, he just got a really shady number, and it freaked him out. Majin Buu's analysis, on the other hand, it's definitely better. I like the bibbidi bobbidi boo line. I think that's funny, especially with how Wiz follows it up with
A Disney lawsuit.
no, the head penis joke is weird because it's an antenna. I know, penis jokes are the only funny jokes anyone wants to make in the early 2010s, but that's still an antenna, and I fail to see how you can't see that. Aside from that, it's a really cool analysis. Even though I don't care about Majin Buu as a character, they made him look pretty awesome. The video clips they use flow with the analysis really well. They stick to the theme of the matchup. It's a good analysis. And I also gotta give a special shout out to the advertisement. It's a nice little jab at people who are salty over Goku versus Superman, and the Toy Story reference is funny. But enough about that. Let's talk about the fight. It starts off with math DDD, so clearly this is a very based episode. And I like how it begins with Kirby eating all the chocolate from Boo's attacks. That's the perfect way you could get these two to start fighting one another. And there's also a surprisingly clever dynamic. Kirby is not particularly strong without his copy abilities, so whenever he doesn't have one, they make Boo the superior fighter. Kirby is able to definitely keep up and even outdo Boo with his copy abilities, but when he loses them, they make them a big deal. Most of the time, that is. What was that sound effect for? Seriously. Cutting to black is kind of a weird way to justify it, but hey, it's good at emphasizing Kirby losing an ability, so yeah. And then you also get a sword fight between the two, and they still prove that Kirby's ability copying is better than Boo's. And then you have Kirby inhaling Boo, and then this is the part where we get to Kid Boo. Okay, for this whole scene, you could tell that this was the most rushed part of the episode. Kid Boo just appears out of nowhere. He vaporizes his other counterpart with one touch, I guess. I do like how it foreshadows the Hypernova ability, but that's the only good thing about this scene. You have him breaking out of Kirby's stomach dimension. It looks pretty cool. I like how it shows Kirby panicking, like, what the f*** is going on? And then he gets Fighter Kirby using voice clips from Yuri Sakazaki. I somehow never noticed that. And then he loses his fighter ability, and then Kid Buu destroys his warp star, but he just doesn't care. He just inhales it and gets the star rod. Just it fires feel. Ooh, I love this sound design! Though it's kind of lame that it does get beat out rather easily, and Kirby looking visibly defeated after it gets destroyed is also kind of weird, but I really like this Hypernova kill. It's really, really good. And then the outro clip is Kirby using Boo's chocolate beam. Brilliant. The conclusion doesn't have too much to talk about, except for this little line here.
And Kirby's warp star moves faster than light. A speed Boo has never had to combat before.
They had Goku at faster than light speeds, but okay. And then they say that the planet level explosions turn Boo to mush when they say multiple times in Boo's analysis that he can still reassemble from those explosions. I mean, the bit about the giant ki blast killing him was all they needed to say. What was this whole thing all about? Ah, well. This episode definitely has its problems. While I do like a lot of the fight, it does have some pacing issues in terms of moments that go on for too long and moments that didn't have enough time to sink in. But now that I know that this episode has had some of, if not the most troubled production out of any episode, at least in season 2, I can't really be too hard on it. And while not everyone agreed with this episode on its release, it was still able to easily become the most successful episode of the Dark Period, proudly standing at over 15 million views and being the 13th most watched death battle of all time. So I'm happy that all of this production paid off in the end. 79 out of 100. The quality doesn't quite match the delays, but a lot of this is really good. Huh, that actually wasn't too bad of a start to the Dark Period. I wonder what the next episode is. I'm going to feed this episode its own heart. Is what I would say if it even had a heart!